Ms.
My name is Jabu Sangova, and I currently serve as the Ethics Officer for the Atlanta Ethics Office. Today I have with me Sherry Dawson, our Business Manager, and Raymond Robinson, Program Manager. Our Deputy Ethics Officer is not here, unfortunately. He's currently under the weather. Okay, so for the benefit of the public, the Atlanta Ethics Office has been around for 20 years, and we are the offices tasked with running the city's ethics program, which means training and education, providing ethics advice, as well as conducting ethics investigations. All right, so I'll go right into the presentation. All right, in slide 2, you'll find our organizational structure, and you'll see that the existing structure highlights the diversity and skills and expertise of the ethics staff. We currently have 14 positions, and 12 of those positions are filled. Okay, so the next slide we're going to go into is our year in review and our look ahead. And we'll talk about first our accomplishments in fiscal year 24. And you'll notice that we've referenced, of course, the mayor's pillar on effective and ethical government, which will be highlighted in all of these accomplishments. So the first noteworthy accomplishment I would talk about would be that we did hire 3 additional staff members in fiscal year 24, and we also retained extra help to help us with our operations. We achieved a 95% filing rate for our 2023 financial disclosure filing season, which was a high level of success. And for the first time in, I don't know, many years, every department received an award for compliance. And I think that's just because we really took extra steps to make sure that every city employee and official was equipped to file their disclosure statements on time. We also achieved a 90% completion rate for our ethics training in 2023. We've been doing ethics training for some time now, and each year the training is really getting better. And so that 91% completion rate would really translate to about 6,868 employees out of 7,545 assigned employees. And that also included our employees that have limited access to technology, so the staff would actually go out and work with the Department of Human Resources to make sure those employees also receive the ethics training. We also received $13,000 in restitution in ethics matters, so that was restitution back to the city, and we collected $2,850 in financial disclosure penalties. Some of the things we've been doing differently this year is we work closely with the Department of Revenue to make sure people can satisfy their sanctions and fines in a seamless way, so we're not actually collecting the money in-house anymore. They have to actually go through the Department of Revenue to pay any fines or sanctions. So now I'll turn into what's new and improved for fiscal year 2025. All right, so one of the things that we're looking at doing and completing in this new fiscal year is we are completing the development of an automated process for the auditing of disclosure statements. So for the benefit of those who may not know what that means, we file disclosure statements every year, but we do not have enough staff to do more review of disclosure statements that are filed. So right now we might be doing about 10-15% of the review of disclosure statements. With the automation system that we're developing and working with the developer, hopefully we'll get close to maybe 70-80% and at some point review every form that's filed. And it'll be done through an automated system. And Mr. Robinson, our program manager, is overseeing that process. We also plan to develop and deploy enhancements to our existing e-file system. As you all know, that is a system that everyone has to file the city financial disclosure statements, the travel reports, the conflict of interest forms, as well as any gifts to the city. So one of the things that we want to actually be doing is constantly improving that system. We are also launching a data management program, and that is to increase efficiency, effectiveness of our operational processes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on another slide. All right, moving on to slide 4. So our full-time FTE count for 2020, for the new year is 14, and we currently have 2 vacancies. So we do have 2 vacancies. However, one of those vacancies are very recent, only it's April of 2024, when we did lose 1 staff member. We're pretty sad about that, but we are, I think, doing pretty well in terms of our vacancy rate, because as you can see, we're only, our vacancy rate is only about 7%. All right, moving on to slide 5, which talks about where are we in terms of budget trends. Are we trending appropriately? So our proposed FY25 budget for ethics is $2.5 million, which we do see is a 20% increase from fiscal year 24. However, that increased budget is supported by the headcount growth, which I talked about earlier. We did fill 3 positions in 2023, as well as existing and upcoming programs, which I will discuss again on the next slide. So that is supported by the 20% increase, which I'll break down. All right, so moving on to slide 6. Slide 6 breaks down the actual dollars. So for the benefit of the public who may not know, our budget is split funded. The majority is from the general fund, and the remaining percentages are supported by watershed and aviation, which is consistent with the citywide impact of the ethics program. So what are the major year-over-year changes that support the increase in our budget? So one of the major, I would say, is the major change would be that additional positions and reclassifications. Our hope is to add one more position this year, as well as potentially reclassify some positions. Our ethics e-file system enhancements to the system, also supported by the increase. The automation of our audit process. We've contracted with a vendor, and so that development is currently in progress and going well, and is slated to launch in August. The data management program that I spoke with. So what is that program really for? We've accumulated a lot of paper, being in existence for 20 years, and so we're looking to streamline all that paper, because one of the things that we do have in progress is a renovation of our existing space. Those funds have been approved through our discussions with the Department of Finance and DEEM, but we do need to have a program in place to get rid of all the paper, streamline our processes, which will really create for a more efficient space. We're revamping our ethics website, which is way outdated. So that's another, also supports the increase in the budget. We're looking at a case management system for our investigations, and we're developing a scope of work on that. And lastly, even though the renovation of our existing space is not counted into our operational, funds have been approved and allocated appropriately. All right, so in final remarks, I would just say is that our office celebrated 20 years last August, which speaks volumes to the city's strong commitment to ethics, as well as the staff's commitment and resilience. We want to thank the administration and the Department of Finance for working with us to craft a budget that we believe will be impactful and significant as fiscal year 2025. I am also grateful, and I think they're here, some of them, right, to the ethics staff for their continued support and dedication to the work that we do. Thank you, and I will take any questions that you may have at this time.
All right, thank you. Just a couple of budget questions. Before I get to that, though, let me kind of step back at the 50,000-foot level and give you the opportunity to remind the public that you report to an independent board. So could you just brief the public on that structure?
Yes, yes. So as ethics officer, I do report to the governing board of the Office of Inspector General and Ethics Office. So the Inspector General and the Ethics Officer do report to that board. And as part of my reporting structure, that board can hires my position, and we do have to report to the board at monthly meetings.
All right, and then 20 years, and that was celebrated down in the atrium recently.
Yes.
When you started, I believe I'm right, that Atlanta was the first city in Georgia with an ethics arm, or am I wrong?
That is correct.
I would also assume now that's much more of a common feature in the municipal landscape in Georgia.
Well, I would say that Georgia is, in terms of, we do have, of course, the state ethics office, and I don't know of other municipalities, but we are definitely, I would say, one of the best standards in the country. And we know that from when we go to conferences, from interacting with other government agencies, that our office is a standard, one of the best standards in the country.
Then your head count proposes to increase by 2. And could you tell us a little bit about kind of the skill sets that they'll be providing?
No, it's not, Chair Shook. It's actually 2 vacancies. One is an ethics advisor we're currently hiring for that position. And the recent vacancy was a business manager. So they're already existing positions.
Okay. Just a question about your performance metrics. Ethics investigations completed, going back to 22, it's 12, 12, 9, 24. Then it becomes a target, and the target is 9. And here's a target for FY25. I mean, how do you define a target? I mean, it seems to me, and maybe this is silly, but it seems to me in a perfect world, target would be 0 investigations.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think you'd be very concerned.
Well, if we
should
didn't
be
need
concerned.
you, I mean, if we didn't need you, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have you, right?
Yeah, if I was to come here and you saw 0 investigations, you might want to be worried. Yeah. So the target may be based on just what we've seen in prior years, and it's just an estimate. It's not necessarily, for example, like training. We usually are able to pretty much estimate with training because we know based on the things that we do, we expect to get, for example, 90% compliance rates. Investigations can be a little bit different.
What's the average length of time to run an investigation?
So it really depends on the complexity of the investigation. There are some that might just take a couple of months and some might extend into a year. I really don't like investigations to go that long, but there are some times when they do stretch that long.
And same kind of thinking that I had during the IG time up here. You don't know how an investigation's going to end up, so you have to go ahead and investigate what's brought to your attention. But you give me an idea, just roughly, of how many investigations include with an unsubstantiated finding?
Unfortunately, I don't have our deputy here because he oversees the investigations. So I would have to get those numbers to you. But one thing I can say is we are very cautious in the, from the onset of investigation, we usually potentially refer to as a review. So we don't essentially name it an investigation until we determine that there are allegations that require an investigation. So we tend to refer to it as a review. And there tend to be a number of matters that are unsubstantiated. And that's just which I've seen in other ethics offices as well. So, which is why you have to be very careful in terms of crafting something, an investigation, before there's an actual thorough review.
All right, fair enough. So you need more space
Yes.
for what must be an unbelievable amount of paper that you accumulate annually. You guys probably process and look at more documents, per person than just probably any other function in this city, given all of the reporting requirements. Hard copies of all of that, are they transcribed into some other format?
Well, to be honest with you, and thanks to our program manager, because he hates paper, in the past 5 years, we really have not kept a lot of paper. So a lot of these documents are documents from many years ago that really should be either archived or destroyed at this point, because according to retention policy, we're not required to retain those documents. So no, we do not keep everything, and part of the reason why we need to do this effort is to get rid of a lot of that paper. I think part of it too is we just haven't had the staffing to do it.
Remind us, per state law, you have to keep documents going back how many years?
So it really depends on the documents. So for example, the disclosure statements of elected officials, we are required to keep those permanently, but that is not a large number of records. Whereas for everyone else, it would fall into our retention policy, which I think is about 5 years. And for example, ethics cases are also things that have to be kept forever. However, based on our conversations with Mr. Robinson, these are documents that can be scanned in electronically, so we don't have to keep so much paper. So those are examples of just some of the timelines with documents.
That concludes my list of questions. Winston has nothing. All right, thank you to you and your team. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I see that audit is here. So if you're ready, we're ahead of schedule, but if you're ready, why don't you